You don't want to be fired. You want to be promoted. You're looking into investing in a unified communication system for your company. You want the recognition that comes with saving money for your company. The thing that you're worried about is, what if it doesn't work? What if there's a problem that arises? How easy is it going to be for you to troubleshoot and get to the bottom of these issues? And that's what we're going to talk to you about today. But first, let's start about expecting the best. With Microsoft Lync, you can expect the best. In Lync 2010, we invested a lot of resources in making sure that we have our highest quality product yet. And we've gotten a lot of customer feedback, a lot of analyst feedback, which confirms our belief in this. We spent a lot of resources in improving the audio quality, so when you have a phone call, it's going to sound crisp and clear. We added diagnostics to our client so that when something goes wrong, when someone has a poor network, or when someone has their mic muted, we'll show you in the UI what that problem can be and how to resolve it. This is something that allows our users to be able to troubleshoot, and customers love this. Additionally, we've had analysts start running tests against us and stressing our deployments. Mircom did a 4 million call stress test. They didn't have a single drop call. We were the first product that they've ever tested to do that. But while you're expecting the best, the Microsoft Lync team is also preparing you for the worst. But we'll get to that in a second. First, let's talk about you and your job. You have a lot on your plate. You're responsible for figuring out how do you deploy the product. What's your high availability story? How do you roll out clients to end users? You work with external teams often. These teams own your telephony gateways. They own your external networks. They own your firewalls, things that you can't control. And they can very easily make you have a bad day. And when they cause a bad day, you have to convince them that they're the ones that made the mistake. You apply patches to servers. You make sure that your servers are constantly up and running. You put updates on them. And when something goes wrong, you're the first person people look to solve it. But outside of work, you also have a family. You have significant others. You have children. You have friends you want to spend time with. When we developed our monitoring and troubleshooting story, we kept all of this in mind. And how do we think about this? Well, we might not be patching servers all the time, but we've been in your shoes. Arish and I, we're not just program managers. Our jobs in Lync 2010 was to use tools that we're going to show you today, every day, all day. We use these tools to find out what issues were in the product and get them fixed. We also use these tools to find out where have our servers been misdeployed, where have things been misconfigured. So these tools we're about to show you have been used and tested and verified and iterated upon. We've also been on the receiving end of a lot of issues that we probably wouldn't want to have been on. But we know in the real world that things happen. Someone rolls out IPsec policies on you, you don't control those. You get issues where, your power supply goes bad, or your machine goes up in smoke. They're things you can't control. But you need to be able to detect when these things happen. These are where our new tools in Lync 2010 come in. Now, I say new tools, but when we look at these, they're tools you've seen before. We have a management pack for Lync. Those of you who've used it before might have said, it's not the greatest thing we've ever used. We've validated it, we've checked it, we've improved it. This is our best monitoring story yet. Monitoring server reports. Those of you who used the monitoring server in the past might have had complaints about, great, you store all this data in the database, but you don't give me any reports to actually use the data. We fixed that. We've built powerful troubleshooting tools on top of this database. And like I said, we've used these again and again. At Microsoft, we've had numerous deployments that we've used these on. We had our own Lync team that had about 1,000, 2,000 users on our deployment. And we validated these tools against what we would consider a small enterprise. Then we have our Microsoft IT department, which today has over 50,000 users deployed on one of our pools. We use these tools to validate every week what are the failures that people are having. And all throughout the Lync 2010 release, we validated these reports. We validated these alerts. So we know these things work. Before I go further, how many of you today have deployed the Lync 2010 SCUM pack? All right. How many of you, how many have an enterprise smaller than 5,000 users? Smaller than 1,000 users who are using the Lync pack? Smaller than 2,000? How many do you have? Two? 2 users? 2,000. Okay, who has less than 2,000? All right, you get an IP phone, sir. Yeah, the guy in the wall. All right, monitoring server. How many of you have used the new monitoring server reports? All right. How many of you deployed it in the last 2 months? The last month? Last week? All right, gentleman in the back. You also get an IP phone. White shirt background. We've got tons more swag to give out today, so good questions, bad questions, we'll have some later for you guys. So let's start off by talking about the Lync 2010 Management Pack. You have a lot to do. You're a busy person. You've got a life outside of work, and you'd like to keep it there. So we're introducing something in Lync 2010 that we call prioritized alerts. These are alerts that are classified for your life in mind. We've created these buckets, high priority, medium priority, and other. In each one of them, we've come up with a classification of what do we think you should do when you see an alert in this bucket. So start with the high priority. Higher priority to us says there is an outage in your deployment right now. A user cannot register. A user cannot see presence. They can't sign IAM, or they can't join a conference. There's an outage right now. And our guidance around this is if you're asleep at 4 a.m., this is something you would wake up and go address. Medium priority alerts. Medium priority alerts are things that are usually severe issues that you want to look at, but they're not affecting users in a severe enough way that you need to jump on them right away. It could be high availabilities at risk. Maybe you had a server go down, but you have a pool with backup servers. So your system's highly available, it still works. Maybe you have performance degradations. Features aren't working as fast as you would like them to, but they're still working. You know, finish your anniversary with your wife. Watch your kid's baseball game. Come back tomorrow, get your cup of coffee, then start looking at these. You should get them taken care of in the next day, but it's not something you have to drop everything to go take care of. Then we have these other alerts. And what are other alerts? They're things that affect a small set of users. This could be too many people are subscribing to the presence of your CEO or someone else. It's only affecting a small set of users, but it's not something you necessarily need to jump on right this second. You have to, if you have to patch your servers, go patch your servers. If you got to write a presentation up for your boss, write a presentation for your boss, and then when you have a chance, you should go look at these. Let's talk a bit more about the high priority alerts, though, because these are the interesting ones. These are the ones that are telling you that there's a complete outage that you need to take a look at. And these today are validated exclusively by synthetic transactions, a new feature we added in Lync 2010. For those of you who haven't used Exchange or another Microsoft product before, synthetic transactions are basically automated bots that periodically ping your servers and try to see if a service is available. And they impersonate real users to show you whether or not these users will be able to sign in, join a conference. These are great, as a side, these are a great support tool as well. We'll see in a second. But when one of these fires, when one of these alerts goes off, we told you to wake up. You should do something about it. But great. Are we going to leave you on an island? Are we going to put you in a place where you're unable to quickly bottom out these issues? The answer is no. When you dig into the alerts, we have detailed product knowledge on each of these synthetic transactions. They tell you about how to run them. You'll notice that these are PowerShell commandlets. If you look in your Lync deployment today and you search for anything that's test-cs, you'll find synthetic transactions. So these are PowerShell commandlets that you can run as support. You could, if a user calls in, you could use that URI, their user alias. Don't even pass credentials. We use certificates to actually connect to the server. So you can use them as support tools. But in this case, if the alert goes off, you can use it with the synthetic transaction user and validate, can you get the same failure? Then we have common causes. Why does this often fail? You'll see things like you've misconfigured the users or servers unavailable. And we'll give you suggested resolutions about how to deal with them. That's great. You have the product details, but how do you know which one's the issue? One of the greatest things that we've added in Lync 2010 across the board is if a component is returning an error to you, they also return detailed diagnostics to you. We hit this home hard with every one of the teams on our group. And every component owner stepped up to the plate and delivered detailed diagnostics of when something fails, they'll tell you why. And this often is added as a diagnostic header into SIP messages, which get propagated back to your client logs, or in this case, it would be into your synthetic transaction logs. And this will be in the alert context, and you can see what the failure was and see where this error came from. In this case, we see we got an error code of 10,403, and it tells us that the user did not have permissions to sign in. So we know that the user here was misconfigured. Now, something to be raised a question here. We have this thing that's going to wake you up in the middle of the night. How confident are we that it's not going to fire erroneously? We've also introduced something called transient error handling. If one of these things goes off, we initially raise it as a warning. SCOM runs the synthetic transactions every 5 minutes. So the first time it fails, we're not going to fire a high priority alert to you. We're going to raise it as a warning. The second time it fails, it's going to be a high priority alert. How painful is monitoring to manage? You have a lot of servers and a lot of pools in your deployment. And you don't want to have to go manually configure every single one of them into the deployment. Well, for those of you who have attended Peter Schmatz's talks yesterday around deployment, you'll have heard something about that we call the Central Management Store. This is a database that contains all of your topology information. So you don't need to tell SCOM about what to monitor. SCOM already knows. We go out to this database, we return, what sites have you configured? What are your pools? What are your servers? So we know what to monitor. This actually allows us to do some pretty cool things. First and foremost, we have this nice topology diagram, so we can show you what your deployment looks like. And you can dig in and you can see at the pool level, at the site level, at the server level, what's the health. And inside the server, you can drill down and see individual components, and are they healthy or not. We also have nodes for sites, pools, and servers that contain stateful alerts. stateful alerts. This means that the alerts that are being raised are an accurate representation of what is happening right now. So when we take a look at this, when we go to these alerts, one of our requirements for medium priority alerts was they have to be able to shut themselves off if the issue goes away. So if you go and look at this view, it will show you only issues that are happening right now. But what issues are impacting your users? That's great. We've got these synthetic transactions that are going to say, what does a test user, does it work or not? We've got these components that are raising alerts saying, okay, things look like they're performing properly. But users are configured differently. You've got some that are in remote sites. You've got some in branch offices. You have users who are configured differently, use different dial plans. Well, what we've ended adding into SCUM is something called call reliability alerts. Because all of our components have done a better job of adding diagnostics, we store this data into the monitoring server, with the monitoring server into the call detail recording database, which Arish is going to talk to you about in a moment. But what this allows us to do is we have a record now of every single call of whether it got established or not. We know whether it dropped or not. And this allows us to mine the database and look for catastrophic events that are impacting your users. And so this ends up being kind of a nice feature for us because we can dig through and find catastrophic events and find out if it causes, figure out which users are being impacted. We can raise up these alerts and tell you someone's being impacted right now. You'll notice that the alert context contains things like, in the last hour, how many users try to use audio? And of those users, how many failed for this exact reason? We raise the alert based on a failure percentage. This percentage has been validated against small deployments and against large deployments. So we feel comfortable that it's not going to cause a lot of noise for you. We've bottomed out these issues, and we found that when they are raised, they are real issues. But that's great. We're telling you that there's a problem. But which users are impacted? Where are these issues happening? Well, if you notice in the alert context, you'll see a URL. That URL is to your monitoring server reports. If you can copy and paste that to your browser, we'll take you to a monitoring server report, which will show you trends. I'm not going to dig too much into this because Arish is going to go through it in a demo in a moment. But what this trend report is going to show you is which pools are hitting this issue the most, which servers are returning the error, which users are hitting the issue, who's calling, who's receiving the call. And these trends have enabled us to bottom out so many issues and deliver Lync at the highest quality. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Arish, who's going to show you the troubleshooting reports and all the great work that we've done with the monitoring server.
Thanks, Jeff. All right. Before we get started, who here, I didn't catch the show of hands earlier, so who here has a Lync deployment which has a monitoring server deployed? All right, pretty good. So I'll skip over the definitional stuff, but essentially it's a data store. It gathers data about what the call quality is and what the session completion rates are. All right. So what did we do in Lync 2010? It's all about diagnostics, more diagnostics, and better diagnostics. There is no session in Lync, everything ranging from IM to audio, video, and application sharing has a diagnostic associated with it. That means whenever any kind of session, peer-to-peer or conferencing, ends in your Lync deployment, the monitoring server will log that data. And not just that, the diagnostics are categorized in a 3-state model. So either it's normal call clearing, success, or it's expected product behavior which led to a session failure. For example, I'm in D&D mode, and you try to IM me. Doesn't work. It's not supposed to. So we put it in the second bucket. And the third bucket is unexpected failures, which actually count as call failures. And these are the ones you care the most about because it means one of three things. Either there's a problem with the endpoint, there's a problem with the network, or there's a deployment configuration issue. And these are things you can go address and figure out how many users are affected by these problems and so on and so forth. So every session has diagnostics associated with it. That's a pretty tall order. It's only one bullet point on a slide, but if you think about it, Lync has, 20 odd server roles? There's approximately 1,500 diagnostics within the product, and they're all categorized, they're all accurate, they're all well documented. And I'll get to that in a minute, what I mean by documentation, because I know we throw that around a little bit. All right, we also log registration failures and diagnostics around that. So if clients are failing to register, you'll know exactly why. All right, so what does a diagnostic look like? Here is what it looks like. Is everybody getting this? That's the reaction I typically get. So before I take a minute to walk through what exactly all the gibberish on the screen is about, let me show you this. All you have to do when you go to one of the reports and mouse over that diagnostic is, all you have to do is mouse over the diagnostic and you'll see a full description with probable causes telling you, go look here. Now, while I can't definitively root cause the issue a priori and build it into the product, we can definitely give you hints that are born out of our experience troubleshooting these deployments for the past year or so while we were in development. All of these diagnostics are pretty well documented. You don't have to print out a big tech manual and have it at your disposal. Everything is just a mouse over when you're looking at the reports. Mouse over and see the description, you know exactly what to do next, for most part. Also, we're adding some data collection for IP phone usage. So if you've got a lot of IP phones rolled out in your deployment, you can figure out what are the different hardware versions that are out there, what are the different software versions, how frequently are people using these phones. So you can take away phones from the people who don't really need them or want them or use them and redistribute it. You don't have to keep on buying new IP phones. It's a nice little thing. And QoE. Who here has used QoE in the past? All right, a smaller number. And so with QoE, there's so many metrics. It's a very rich and complex data set. And people often joke and tell me that, I need a PhD in audio signal processing in order to use QoE. I understand that pain. And the problem isn't a simple one either. Audio quality is a very tricky problem, especially when you're looking at VoIP. But we've made a whole bunch of improvements here, which includes answering the million-dollar question that you don't want to dig through 50 metrics to figure out, was it or was it not a poor quality call? I'll talk to that a little later. But we've added a bunch of contextual data about what kind of endpoint you're operating with. So if someone is trying to do HD video with a single-core laptop, it's not going to work very well. Not just that, it's actually going to screw up the audio quality. So we log all that information about what's the OS, what's the number of cores, what's the processor speed, and we also log information about what kind of notifications we surfaced up. In the product, we built in notifications which tell you, hey, your machine is running too slow. It's going to cause all kinds of problems, or your network is bad. We capture all that information in QoE. We capture if you've got a bad device and you're leaking echo. And all of that will be highlighted. We have audio healer technology which tries to recover the audio if you've got a lot of network loss. We highlight everything on the reports when it tells you that, hey, at this point the technology broke. Here's a red flag. You know that the call was poor. You don't have to go looking. It'll be color-coded. That simple. Another thing you get about QoE, and of course we did this with diagnostics also, is what does all this stuff mean? And first few times I was asked this question, I was asked about jitter by a few people a couple of years ago at a conference just like this one. And I said, well, jitter is the average variation in inter-arrival time between audio packets. It's like, yes, but what does that mean? I just told you what it means. Well, now we're actually telling you what it means to you. So that when your CEO gives you a call and says, hey, this new Lync 2010 thing, I'm having audio quality issues, can you look? And you're troubleshooting his call, and you see high jitter highlighted in red. You're like, hey, can you tell me what your symptoms were? Yeah, I was getting choppy audio. All you have to do is mouse over, you'll know exactly why he was getting choppy audio. And you can tell him, hey, can you just switch to wired? That's the most common cause. People are using Wi-Fi for audio calls, and they're sitting in a place with a weak signal. So everything in QoA is not just documented in TechNet, what its true meaning. It's meaning for you, not for me, not for the audio DSP PhD, but what does all this stuff mean for you? All of this is not just documented on TechNet, it's actually built into the product. So when you're troubleshooting, you don't have to go too far. Simplify it so that you don't need to spend hours and hours. All right, so reporting is best done with a demo, but I'm quickly going to just review the big buckets. I have nicknames for all of them, or most of them at least, from our experiences and war stories over the past year while we were building all this stuff. So the end user troubleshooting report is something that typically is used by help desk. I call it the my CEO had a bad call and I have to figure this out before I go home report. Certainly happened a bunch of times to Jeff and myself. There's a dashboard which is my IT manager needs to see how much money are we saving with Lync. It tells you key deployment indicators like how many conferencing minutes are being used, how many PSTN conferencing minutes were used over the past week. If you're switching over from Verizon or somewhere else, and you're trying to figure out how much money are you actually saving, all that stuff is going to show up pretty nicely on the dashboard. And one nice thing about SQL Server reporting services, which is how a reporting pack is built, is that you can configure all this stuff to get sent out in an email on an automated fashion on a weekly basis. So you can just set up an email notification off the dashboard for your IT manager on a weekly basis. Every Monday morning, he gets this in his inbox. You don't have to do anything. Then there's reports which drill deeper into usage of different features like audio conferencing, like voice, and of course, asset management like IP phones like we talked about, figuring out how many IP phones do you have in your deployment and how are they being used. The biggest bucket is operational troubleshooting though. This has two categories. One is media quality, which is the old QoA reports, and we've added a few things there to make it a little better. And the session diagnostics, which is where we've instrumented each and every single session in the product to give you complete diagnostics information. And you can use these to troubleshoot. You can start off from a very high level about what's going on in my deployment, across the board, and then drill down, hey, what's going on this pool, or in this region, or on this site? What's going on in North America? Drill down, what's going on in the Seattle office, or the Atlanta office? Drill down, what's going on with these 5 guys? And so on and so forth. So with that, I'll step off the slides and let's look at some demos. And so I have to confess I cheated a little bit. I loaded up all the stuff I wanted to show, mostly because I wasn't sure about whether I'd have access to the servers back in Redmond or not. So the stuff we are going to look at, this data, is a live Microsoft deployment. It's got close to 50,000 users on it right now. We're rolling it out across Microsoft. Everybody in Microsoft uses Lync for their telephone system. So we live and breathe this stuff on a daily basis. Anytime stuff breaks, we're on the hook. The part Jeff was telling you guys about, where we were part of this task force, where we went in and troubleshot all the failures that would happen in a dog food deployment on a daily basis, day in, day out. We tried to live this life as close as possible. And a lot of the improvements in these tools are born out of those experiences. So Let's start off with the dashboard. So the dashboard, let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. 4 sections, tells you about the usage, how many minutes of conferencing are getting used, and it has a little line, squiggly line chart, which kind of tells you trends over the past few weeks. Yes, much better view. You can figure out how many PSTN conferences, how many PSTN minutes, and things like that. It's pretty good if you're trying to get a high-level view of what's going on in your deployment. Then you have the diagnostic section, which tells you call failures for peer-to-peer, for conferencing. And then you can drill in from here as well. And then what are the top pools which are experiencing issues? Is it one particular pool which is maybe misconfigured in some way, shape, or form, and it's having the most issues? Or is it across the board, niggles here and there in your network? And of course, this is, the media quality diagnostics section. So I talked a little bit about how you don't have to worry about figuring out what is a good quality call versus a poor quality call anymore. So what we built into the product this time around is a call classification criteria. That call classification criteria was born out of a lot of exhaustive testing in the labs, figuring out what are the exact limits of our technology along different dimensions. How much echo can I inject into a call before my echo cancellation algorithms break? How much network loss can I handle before you actually begin to hear something break in the audio in your phone call? And once we did all that testing and figured out exactly what are the breaking points of our technology, we built that into the product. So anytime a call exceeds any one of those breaking points, we flag it to you as a poor quality call. And everything is nicely highlighted and color-coded so you don't have to, once again, have a PhD in audio signal processing. So peer-to-peer conferences, top servers. If there's a particular gateway that might be misconfigured, it has an old firmware version, and all the PSTN calls are having a lot of noise or echo or jitter, you'll know from here. All these things just pop up at you when you pull up the dashboard. And the dashboard is just the starting point. So this is the home page. Now, folks who've used the reports earlier in OCS 2007 and OCS 2007 R2, you see it's a pretty large number of reports. And with Lync 2010, we feel pretty confident that we've covered most of the critical scenarios as far as reporting is concerned. We've got a pretty wide set of usage reports. We've got a pretty wide set of call diagnostics and troubleshooting reports, media quality, and of course the per user troubleshooting report for when your CEO has trouble. So I'm going to pick one report from each section just to kind of get a flavor of how they look. When you install Lync 2010 and the monitoring server, obviously lots of time to play with these. So from the system usage bucket, I'm going to pick on the PSTN conference summary report. Here's how it looks. So when you're migrating off of ACP bridges, one of the common things that pops up is, hey, we used to pay Verizon X amount of dollars per minute that we used to use. How much money is Lync saving me? So you can figure out exactly how many minutes of PSTN conferencing your Lync 2010 deployment is serving up on a daily basis. Not just that, you can actually break it down to an hourly basis if you drill down. Sorry. And there's some charts as well which tell, kind of graph things out for you. So as you're bringing more and more people onto your deployment, expanding out of a pilot to more of a full-fledged deployment, you begin to see how the data changes, how the behavior, the usage changes. And it also gives you a nice little trend of between total AV conferencing minutes and PSTN conferencing minutes, what's the distribution? Are your customers, are your end users in your deployment using a lot of VoIP, or do they prefer PSTN? A lot of deployments start out using Lync, and I've seen this with quite a few customers. Start out using Lync, and they want to use it as a PSTN dial-in conferencing solution. But once you roll it out, people start downloading the client and like, this is quite nice. I click on the link and I'm in a meeting and I get desktop sharing and everything as well. So a lot of times, the trends change and the PSTN usage drops off within 6 months and the VoIP usage goes up. So if I drill down, there's an hourly view as well. All this stuff can be exported into spreadsheets. So if you want to run analytics on top of it, on these reports, you can certainly export them to a spreadsheet and build macros on top of that if you're doing ROI analysis or more complex workflows like that. But the raw data is served up pretty nicely. Oops. So the next one I want to show you, where is this? My tabs are a little out of order. Yep. So the next one I want to show you is in the media quality section. This is the location report. And what this does is, does anyone here have CAC or is looking into deploying CAC with Lync? All right. So call admission control, which allows you to manage WAN bandwidth when you're rolling out Lync, consumes IP addresses for all your subnets in different geographical regions and rolls them up into logical sites, and logical sites roll up into logical regions. Now the monitoring server is pretty smart. This is one place where we were able to find engineering alignment which might make your life easier as well. It consumes the same data and it builds a logical geographical map of your deployment. So here is how it looks for Microsoft. We have Europe and the Middle East, Asia, US, and you can figure out how many calls are going across. This is not fully configured data, so it's partial data. That's why you might see a little oddness in the numbers. Hey, why is Microsoft US only having 90 calls and why is Asia having 4,728 calls over a week? The data is not complete here. We are just bringing this deployment up, and this is still a work in progress. But you can see Asia to US, EMEA to US, Asia to EMEA, all these calls. And what is the quality? One thing we show you is the poor call percentage. So what is the quality of calls across each of these geographical regions? And not just that, when you drill into these regions, I pop up a list of sites here. So I can see how good are calls between New Zealand and Australia. Well, there was only one call, unfortunately, in this case. But how about Hong Kong and Beijing? There were 30 calls, and the poor call quality percentage is 3.33. That means there was one bad call. And you can see along which of these metrics the calls are bad. So if I look here, the highlighted stuff in yellow is round trip time. So the call was getting close to bad as far as latency was concerned, and that makes sense, right? I'm across an ocean. I can see that happening. And I have a funny story here. While we were using this stuff last year, while we were building it and using it and trying to iterate and refine and make these more usable and helpful, we have a development center in Zurich where some of the folks who work on the audio conferencing stuff work out of. And I used to be on calls with them every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. And if the 9 a.m. call wasn't bad enough, there was constant audio quality issues, and there was always problems getting the application sharing refreshed. So working in audio conferencing myself, I went and took a look at the report, the location report, and what we found was there was very high latency. There was up to a second of latency in some cases. 1 second of latency between when you say something and I hear it on the other end. Just quite bad. And I didn't have to look very hard. I just pulled up this report and this kind of a view. I saw Zurich, Redmond, 700 millisecond is the average latency. I don't have that data today because it was a very long time ago and a lot of it has been flushed. Otherwise, I would have shown you. And what we did was we started off an investigation with the IT folks over there who were responsible for the WAN links and the network connectivity. And after about a month or so, I think the issue started to get resolved. They got some traction. They bought a fatter pipe and things like that. And it was that easy. All I had to do was pull up this report. I didn't even have to drill down anywhere. It just pops up at you. So it's a pretty powerful report, and this is something we've always wanted to do, but we finally gotten this done and delivered and packaged up nicely in 2010. Of course, you can drill down into sites and calls. So if I drill down, it'll actually give me a list of calls. And I'm just going to slide to the right a little bit here because I don't want to share PII. But you can see the metrics that are bad, the dimension along which our call quality broke, show up in red and yellow. So not only do you know that the call was bad, you know why it was bad. And this is a list of poor calls. It tells you what endpoints. And from here, you can drill down much deeper into the detailed call quality report, which will list out for you all the 50-odd metrics. You'll be able to see, hey, what operating system was this user using? How many cores do they have? Was it a very old and slow processor running Windows XP? Or was it running Win 7 with the latest and greatest? And they have some nice trends graphs as well. So if I click on MS, US, and EMEA, for example, I can see over time what are the call volumes, how are they fluctuating. Does my poor call quality start to increase when the call volumes rise over a particular WAN link? That makes sense, right? If I've got a lot of calls going over a thin pipe, at some point there'll be network congestion and things will start to kind of degrade. So all those things, very visually represented in this report. All right. So the next one I would like to show you, if I can figure out where it is. So the next one I want to show you is the call diagnostic summary report. So this is about call failures. This is not about call quality. This one is about calls that didn't even get set up. And these are the ones you care about because people will just call you and tell you, hey, my phone is not working. This Lync stuff really sucks. Why did you deploy it? Of course, that never happens, but just in case it does, due to a config issue. So this is how it looks when you drill into it. At a high level, it gives you a snapshot of what's going on in your deployment for peer-to-peer calls and for conferencing calls. And it covers all modalities, like we talked about. So this is where all that nice diagnostics data that we spend so much time making sure is accurate is rolling up. You know exactly what's happening for each aspect of your deployment. So let's drill in a little bit here into audio. And this is how audio looks for the past week. So you see the unexpected failure bucket that we talked about, the 3 categories in that model. So the unexpected failure bucket is the call failures. And you can see here what percentage of calls failed over the past week on a daily basis. Not just that, we can drill down. So I want to see what are the top causes. So I just click in here, and I drill down. And it gives me the top 10 reasons why calls failed for audio. So from a high-level view of what's going on in my whole deployment, I step down to peer-to-peer audio, just voice. What's going on here? And then I step down into what are the top 10 reasons for calls failing in voice. And number 1 is 10503, the thingy we looked at earlier. Gateway responded with a 503 service unavailable. So as you can see, it's not a problem with Lync, it's a problem with the gateway. So let's drill down into it. So I want to dwell on this a little bit because this is pretty cool. Components that are outside of the Lync infrastructure that impact our performance, like a gateway, for example, will show up here. And not only that, the header that we looked at, and we'll look at a more detailed example in a little bit, actually has the gateway FQDN as well. So if you think about it, you don't need an add-on monitoring solution for your IPPBX and for your gateway. We give you a pretty good and complete starting point to go look at. So let's drill down a little bit into this gateway issue. And I have a story about this as well, but I'll tell you after we walk through this flow. So these are the pools that are having this issue, and you can see Lync 2010-02CL in North America is the worst affected. So maybe there's something wrong with the way we've set up the gateways there. And if I drill into the sessions, I can actually get a list of calls. Was it one user maybe with a misconfigured dial plan who tried to make 500 calls because he was frustrated but persistent, and he kept trying to call again and again the same number, and that's why you have 500 failures? Or is there a bunch of people who are having issues and the problem is more systemic? Those kinds of things become very obvious when you just, drill down a little bit and look at the call list. And you don't have to look at each call. You just go like this. Oh, okay. Yep, different users, not the same guy. At least that's how we did it when we used to deal with these problems. So I drill into the session detail. And here it becomes a little bit more fun. So this is how a single session looks like when you're looking at it in detail. It tells you which pool, start time, finish time, the phone number that was called, the user that made the call, what kind of endpoint were they using. This person was using a Lync endpoint. They weren't using a device. They were not using a 10DOC. They were using a Lync endpoint. So the Lync desktop client. And I can tell that this person was internal. The dialed number, which is hitting the mediation server, that's the component that handles our voice, is internal. And the person who made the call was not internal. So someone was sitting outside of the network, probably at home, trying to make a phone call, and that failed. And the user is not using a desk phone. And there was no retries. And then I go to the diagnostic ID, and the full description of what the common known causes of this problem are pops up very nicely and disappears, it seems. But you can tell what's going on.
Actually, can you fix that?
Yes, I will take an action item. We will file a CU bug, and we will go back and fix that. It should not disappear. And if it's a problem with SSRS, I will file a bug on SSRS and make sure they fix it. Because, yes, this is not nice. All right, so that's just contextual information, right? This gives you a sense of what's going on when you're trying to troubleshoot, sitting down, hey, why is this guy's phone call not working? But let's drill in a little deeper into the detail. This is how the exact, raw, unfiltered data about the call looks like. So the final diagnostic header, and I'm going to zoom a little bit now, because now we'll walk through the header a little bit and just kind of try and make sense of all this gibberish. So 10503 is the ID. It's a unique identifier. Each of the 1,500 codes or so have their own unique identifier. The source is actually the box name, the server that inserted or experienced the failure and inserted the diagnostic code. So you can tell which one of your mediation servers, which is responsible for all the PSTN calls, had the issue. So you know where to look. If it's a config issue, if it's a firewall issue, you know which box you're talking about. And the reason tells you what exactly, in half a sentence or one sentence the problem was. So it was a PSTN gateway that returned a SIP failure code. Well, do I really care? And then it tells you the component. In this case, it's our all too familiar mediation server, which delivers PSTN calling. You see the SIP response code. It was a 503, the response text. And what's really nice is it tells you which gateway it was. So each component in the Lync 2010 release took responsibility for making sure that they augment all their diagnostics with rich enough contextual information that when someone like me who doesn't know anything about the mediation server is looking at it and trying to figure out why Steve Ballmer's call failed, I know where to go, where to start with. I know which gateway it was and things like that. We also capture a bunch of provisional diagnostics. So you're trying to establish the call, a provisional response comes in, it tells you, hey, I'm trying to route to the primary pool. All that flow is completely documented. So if you're getting redirected from pool to pool and the call finally fails, you can actually trace things down to a great degree of detail. It's like every signaling interaction that takes place gets logged, and you can look at it. So you don't do this at a macro level, obviously, but when you get into troubleshooting, when you get into the heart of it, you can still do that. The ability exists. Now, if you're looking at deployment-wide data, you're not going to do this for 10,000 calls. But when your CEO's call fails, this is going to come in handy. All right. So the next bucket is the last bucket that I want to talk about. I'm actually going to see if I can do a little demo here. No. This is interesting.
Bottom one you already navigated to the report. So the bottom one you already navigated to the report.
Ah, here I am. So, sorry. All right, so when I drill into the user activity report, this is the end user troubleshooting report. I can just put in my username. But before we do that, that's kind of boring. So before we do that, let's actually do something more fun. Let's actually make a call and break it, because breaking stuff is so much fun. So I am going to call a bot, and I'm going to inject packet loss. And beyond troubleshooting, I want to highlight something else here, which is why I'm doing this. I'm going to start the call, and I'm going to start packet loss. It's going to be about 12% packet loss, which is kind of the limit where our technology breaks, 12 to 15%. It depends on conditions, but with 12%, I can break it pretty easily, most cases. Hope it works. Taking a while. The demo gods are not in a good mood. Let's try the other bot.
To check your call quality, record a short message after the tone. Then wait to hear how you sound.
So I've got about 12% packet loss running with this tool here. And if you notice the UI,
Here's what I've heard.
you see this signal strength icon? I've got about 12% packet loss running with this tool here. And
If you like what you heard,
let's do this. Yep. So this is about UX. It's about reducing the number of help desk calls you see. It doesn't strictly fit into monitoring and diagnostics, but this is, when you have a bad call, one of the things we've done with Lync 2010 is let the user know why they're having the experience they're having. So if our technology is breaking due to some external reason, we try and set expectations that, hey, you got a bad network, or hey, you're leaking a lot of echo, your call might really suck. And and your speaker is muted, so you might not be able to hear anything. So we do that so that, the user doesn't blame the product and doesn't blame you for rolling it out. Because if I'm sitting in a Starbucks in a corner and everyone else is watching YouTube videos and I can't get enough bandwidth for my VoIP call, it's not the fault of the product, and it's not your fault either as the admin. But they should know, and they should be able to control their experience and help themselves. Maybe they switch over to their cell phone if they can't get a good enough signal over Wi-Fi. But we let them know. And not just that, let's actually pull up the call report for this call that we just made, if the demo gods bless me, that is. So this was my user account. I am just going to everything is Pacific time for Microsoft, so 8 a.m. is when this call was made, apparently. This is kind of why I pre-cached the demo a little bit. It can take a little while, especially if there are like 50, 60,000 users. pumping data into the database. But actually, while we wait for that to stand up, here is how a media quality report looks like. So we've looked at the signaling part of the reports, right, when you're troubleshooting. But here is how the media quality stuff looks like. So you can tell here, I actually made a call last night, so we can fall back to this and did the same experiment. I've got a dual-core CPU. I've got my processor speed is approximately 2.2 gigahertz. I'm not running virtualized. I wasn't doing media bypass or anything like that. I was calling a test bot. And I was connected over the relay. I was in a hotel, so I was coming in over a media relay, the AV Edge. My Wi-Fi was not in the best of shape. It was a 36 kbps, 36 megabits per second connection. So I had weak signal when I made this call, as it is. And you can pick up the base station ID. So if you've got a lot of access points, and sometimes you're trying to troubleshoot, okay, is there a problem with the Wi-Fi in this part of the building? Base station IDs are a very helpful thing to have around. We log that. It also tells you the capture device. This is the most common cause in our experiences. I get pinged by people all the time saying, hey, my audio is sucking, and can you help me make this better? And the first thing I look at is like, what device are you using? Laptop speakers and mic. They have terrible acoustic characteristics. If you're using your laptop speakers and mic, you're most likely to have a bunch of echo. And we'll handle it for you. The acoustic echo cancellation works pretty well, but there's trade-offs. So if you're canceling a lot of echo because the materials and the acoustics of the laptop mic and speakers are bad, you'll drop a little bit on volume. So there's trade-offs there, and those are trade-offs we make internally. But you can tell how much my mic was glitching. If my CPU is running really hot, if I have BitTorrent running and I'm playing H.264 encoded HD 1080p videos along the side while I'm on a call, I'll have a lot of glitching. As you can see here, I was leaking a lot of echo. It tells you exactly what it is. And we'll get that SSRS bug fixed. But most importantly, I told you about, you don't have to guess anymore whether it was a good quality call or a poor quality call. Everything is highlighted nicely, color-coded. Any of these critical metrics that we use to decide whether it was a good quality call or a poor quality call, any of these dimensions, the moment it breaks, it's flagged. So this call broke on 5 different dimensions. We have a total of 7 key metrics. It broke on 5 different dimensions. With my lossy Wi-Fi and the experiment I was running, it was actually 22% packet loss. And this audio healer that I mentioned, which actually reconstructs audio after lost packets, it actually interpolates and does a lot of funky DSP and reconstructs audio. It was working overtime. And once it crosses about 6-7%, it will still continue to work to recover the audio, but you'll notice a perceptible audio quality impact. Like you'll notice a difference. And that's the part we are highlighting, that the user experienced bad audio quality. Not that the network conditions were bad and we tried to recover it and we were able to recover it. If that happens, you're good. It won't flag it as a poor quality call. But it is when the user experiences poor call quality that we'll flag it to you as a bad call. And that's what we mean when we say quality of experience, quality of experience, quality of experience. It really is the quality of the end user's experience that we care about and that we believe you care about. And one of the other nice things, if it would present itself. Yep. So you saw the user notifications, right? The network, poor network quality icon and whatnot. That stuff shows up here also. And you can tell for what duration of the call the user had these notifications popping up. So even if you have a quad-core laptop and you're running full blast, if you have, let's see, where is this? CPU insufficient time. If you have a high percentage of CPU insufficient time showing up, that means that they probably had a bunch of stuff running on their machine or their machine was running slow, due to which Lync was not able to process audio real time. And they heard glitching and things like that. So not just the context that exists, but it's actually telling you what shape the machine was in and whether that affected Lync or not. That's pretty cool, I feel. I don't know what everyone else thinks. So, yep, that's about it for my demos, I think. This did show up. So you can look at the latest one. So this is how the flow looks. People are probably familiar if you've used monitoring server before. You put in the username, it shows up all your calls. If there's conference calls, it'll show up the conference calls also. Let's see, 5:17, 8 a.m. Here we are. Which one do I want? I'll take this. Pretty short call. Oh, and one nice thing about the user notifications, there's actually a web URL that showed up. I don't know if people noticed it. That web URL is a hook. You can provision things to point to your internal support site, which you can use to set up a checklist. Hey, make sure you have the right device. Make sure you're not on VPN. Make sure you're plugged into a wired connection if you don't support VoIP over Wi-Fi, things like that. So you can kind of build a nice little support workflow through the UX. So it goes a little outside the realm of monitoring, specifically monitoring infrastructure, but it's a pretty nice thing to have set up, because what it does when you think about monitoring is it should reduce the number of help desk calls you get, thereby reducing your support costs. So supporting your users for Lync is not so expensive anymore. Go ahead.
Do you guys run a single monitoring server to monitor all of your pools, or do you recommend having monitoring servers per 1 or 2 or 4 pools? And then
Monitoring servers scale pretty well. So in our internal deployments historically, we've run a single monitoring server. And I believe we go up to about 100,000 users when we're all rolled out. And it works fine. Of course, if you've got a lot of data pumping into the system, sometimes the reports slow down a little bit. But it's 100,000 users making phone calls, and you're trying to, 50 different people trying to pull stuff up. It's a reasonable thing to happen, I suppose. But yeah, you don't have to deploy too many additional servers. One is.
do you practice giving the access to the monitoring servers to regular users to find out who attended their calls? Or
We do not do that because there's no RBAC, role-based access control, in the monitoring server. It's a nice functionality that would be very nice to be able to make more accessible. Like if I could troubleshoot my reports and figure out, that's something that's come up every once in a while, but it's not something that's been a very prominent concern or ask.
The way they're built today, if I had access to look at my calls, in theory, I could also look at your calls. So, yeah, so we don't set it up that way. People do set up in SSRS. You can configure security groups for different reports, and sometimes we'll do, okay, support engineers can access these reports and not access other ones.
that's what we've done so far, but we have had a lot of calls where users have been wanting to, a lot of our users get compensated for how long they stay on the call. So their managers wanted to know when they attended the call, when they left the call. They've asked us. So far, it's been an IT help desk request.
Yeah.
IT has to go and fetch that, but just wanted to know if you guys have it in the roadmap.
I don't know if we have anything in the roadmap. I know there has actually received that same question yesterday of someone who is like, I have a manager who wants to see every day what calls their user had. And SSRS has a feature for subscriptions. So you can go into the reports and configure and say, mail for this user, mail a report every day to that manager. So that way you don't have to do it every day, but you can set up subscriptions to do that if you want. But we don't have anything in the roadmap right now for that specifically.
All right, I'm just going to wrap up quickly, and we can just switch to Q&A. So documentation. Of course, we built a lot of this stuff into the product, but documentation is still helpful to have to refer to. So there's a bunch of documentation that's already up there on TechNet. You can, hopefully this deck serves as collateral. But there's a bunch of documentation that's coming live today, which includes 2 very nicely shot videos showcasing Jeff's acting skills. He's actually taking folks through a troubleshooting workflow and kind of showing how we troubleshoot stuff. So hopefully all the new documentation that's coming online makes it a lot easier. We want this to be as simple as possible. Like even through the talk, we were kind of wondering, is this a technical enough talk? And the truth is, you don't want it to be. When you're under the gun and you're trying to troubleshoot what went wrong with someone's call, and they're pinging you as like, hey, can you fix it? Can you fix it? My phone is down. You don't want it to be technical. You want these tools to make it easy enough that you can look, figure out, go home, and have dinner. Not be up till 3 a.m. in the night being super technical. So that's one of the things we've aspired to throughout our efforts over the past release. And some other documentation. One thing I want to call out is, if you have documentation feedback, if you want to see more documentation in a specific area, please email this alias. Our doc folks are very keen to hear back on what's missing and what more people would like to see. So they're looking forward to hearing from you if you notice anything missing. And just for takeaways, only 2. If you're serious about rolling Lync 2010 in your enterprise, these are optional tools, strictly speaking, but you can't really do without them. If you're rolling out a meaningful deployment to a meaningful user base, you need these tools. And I say this to you not because I'm presenting here and I'm supposed to push this or encourage people to adopt this. I say this to you because we walked this road, day, night, week after week, for quite a few months. And we built this tool set not on whiteboards, but we've iterated, used it on a day-to-day basis, day in, day out, refined it. And while I can't claim that this is the silver bullet that solves all your problems, I can claim that when you install Lync and roll it out to your users, this tool set will help you take that step with a great degree of confidence for when you're thinking about what if something goes wrong. This tool set, I hope, encourages a lot more confidence. So a lot of nice tidbits that come along with, and that's it. Thank you all for your time, and thank you for listening to our stories. Please go ahead and fill out surveys. Let us know how we did. Let us know if this information was useful. We really look at these very closely when we are planning for sessions. What happened in the previous conference? Were people able to make use of the information we presented? And it really factors a lot into our planning. So if you liked something, please let us know so we keep doing it. We don't take it out of the next deck. And if you didn't like something, let us know what you didn't like. Or if you thought something was missing, do let us know what you'd like to see.
Are you going to post the slides?
Yes, the slides should be posted now. We were kind of refining them as we went along up till pretty late, but they should be posted now.
Yeah, we have time for questions as well.
Yep.
So feel free to ask away. Also, Arish and I are both working the booth this afternoon, so feel free to come find us to ask any questions you might have.
Cool. Thank you all.